Greetings, it's week 5. Welcome to CED 509, Counseling Ethics and Legal Issues for School Counselors. This week we will focus on two types of delivery methods that school counselors engage counselees in. One being individual counseling, which is a counseling relationship between the school counselor and a counselee, and group counseling, which is focused on anywhere from 3 to 6 counselees in one counseling session. We'll start with individual counseling, which is a counseling relationship between the school counselor and one counselee. Any of the topics can be discussed, whether it's from academic, career, or social-emotional domain as indicated by the Ask a National model. So academic issues that may come up are maybe their grades are decreasing, or maybe they're not doing as well in school, they're unable to concentrate. It's also career development. You might hear about this more on the secondary level in high school, where you have high school students trying to determine what they want to do once they graduate. So whether they go into the military, go to trade school, go to college, or they go directly to work. And then there's social emotional issues. Now, many of you may think because, well, if it's at the elementary level or the middle school level, you might get more social emotional issues, but you also will find that at the secondary level. So don't be surprised when your counselors come to you and say, hey, I've been touched inappropriately, or my boyfriend is beating me, or my girlfriend is taking money from me and forcing me to spend money on her I don't have. Any of those things can come to you. So in an individual counseling session, you do have the advantage of confidentiality because there aren't other counselors there. Sometimes counselors feel more comfortable speaking to the school counselor one-on-one as opposed to in a group setting. So those are some of the advantages. Now, some of the things that you'll have to be thinking about is we as school counselors are unique in the fact that our counselees don't come to school just to be counseled. Our counselees are there for an education. So there's going to be different ways in which you have access to your counselees, particularly if you know you need to have a conversation with them. That includes having a great rapport with your teachers and your staff. On the other hand, group counseling allows school counselors to meet with a group of counselees, anywhere from 3 to 6 counselees, to focus on one particular topic or issue that all are experiencing. Now, you may have a little bit more of a challenge with maintaining confidentiality, which is very important, particularly as we just talked about FERPA and keeping records confidential, confidentiality in and of itself. When do we break confidentiality, both in an individual and group counseling relationship? So as we just talked about those things, it's also very important to understand that in a group counseling setting, particularly with that group dynamic, the academic, career, and social emotional topics can give you a lot more information. And when you're looking at the group dynamic itself, you have the ability to kind of understand some of the nuances of the group, how that individual functions within the group, even though they're all focusing on a similar topic. And you can kind of pick up on body language and social cues and facial expressions. That may help that counselee on an individual level. So both delivery methods work hand in hand in the school system, particularly as a school counselor. You might counsel that person individually, and you'll say, you know what, there's a group of kids just like you, kind of have some of the same issues. Would you mind talking as a group? Or you might see someone in the group counseling setting, you're going, they might need a little bit more individualized help. Let me suggest individual counseling to that student. So you have advantages in both, where there's group counseling can make your counselees feel a little bit more comfortable and not feel as alone. And you also have the privilege of saying, maybe I have a counselee that needs a little bit more individualized attention. Or you might be in an individual counseling relationship and say, this person or this counseling may benefit from being with a group that's going through some similar issues. So there's 4 major ethical concerns that we have to be aware of when there's individual counseling relationships and group counseling relationships. The first one is boundary crossings. And what boundary crossings are, where school counselors may help counselees to help advance their academic career, social, emotional development. So for example, if we have a student that wants to go to a particular college, don't have the money for the admissions fee, and it's very difficult and have lack of resources, a school counselor may pay for the admissions fee so they can submit the application or what have you to be considered for admissions. Or another boundary crossing may be, we've had a situation where school counselors have had to purchase a coat for a student because it was simply too cold for that student to be without a coat, or found a resource that supplies coats, particularly in colder atmospheres. That has happened as well. So anything to do to help a counselor, to enhance them or to help them out, that's a boundary crossing. However, there's also boundary violations. So for example, let's say that same school counselor provided a coat for a counselor because it was just too cold for them to have the coat that they had, but then start approaching them in an inappropriate way as a contingency. That's a boundary violation. So this is when school counselors engage in behavior and conduct that is based on academic, career, or social emotional help, but more so as a contingency to say, hey, I'll take you to that college fair, but this needs to happen. Or, your parents can't get you to this interview. I'll take you. However, there's inappropriate things going on. So that's the difference between boundary crossings, when you're helping to enhance, and boundary violations, where you're utilizing your power as a school counselor to get your way. And that's not ethical. Some of the ways in which those two are affected, both boundary crossings and boundary violations are affected, are through transference and countertransference. You'll hear more about those terms in your Introduction to Counseling course, as well as your Counseling Theories course, especially there. Transference is the ability of a situation that a counselor mentions to affect the school counselor personally and kind of transfer those feelings over to the counselor. So for example, if you as a school counselor had an adverse childhood experience and it has not been resolved, if you haven't gone to counseling yourself and a counselor comes in and talks about something that triggers you and it kind of projects onto your counselor, well, that's transference. You have to be very, very careful because you can engage in boundary crossings because of transference. So if a counselor comes to you and says, hey, my mother won't let me eat anything because my mother's boyfriend says if you feed the child, I'm leaving, but I'm always hungry. A school counselor who might have gone through that can say, okay, I can take them to the cafeteria, or you can suggest, can you get here in the morning early enough for breakfast? That's a boundary crossing, but a boundary violation is that school counselor calling that mother, and she can call the mother and say, hey, we have some concerns, counselor's not eating. But if she calls that mother and says, what the hell is wrong with you? Why are you allowing your boyfriend to dictate when your child eats? One, that's inappropriate, even though she may be feeling that way or he may be feeling that way. That's called transference, because now you've engaged in a boundary violation based upon some unresolved adverse childhood experiences you've had as a school counselor when you were a child. Which gets us over to countertransference, which is when the counselee almost becomes the counselor. And this is when you're talking about school counselors who have unresolved issues, such as adverse childhood experiences, which you learned about a couple of weeks ago, and connect so much with the counseling that the boundary violations become more of, hey, you could text me at home about this, or I can come pick you up and we can go to this group. And it becomes more of a relationship that's no longer a counseling relationship, but here's someone I can identify with, and this is going to help me, as opposed to you as a school counselor seeking out help and counseling for yourself. So these four terminologies will come up as we go along for the next few weeks. And is even going to come up a little later in the week on this Thursday for our first synchronous session on Thursday, Friday the 4th at 6 p.m. via Zoom. You'll get your Zoom room, you get the link to the Zoom room, you get the code, and we'll come in at 6 o'clock. We're going to have a lot of fun, and more importantly, we are going to engage in understanding what we've done over the past few weeks. We'll talk about confidentiality, which comes up a lot in individual and group counseling sessions as school counselors. We'll talk about when to notify mandated reporters and all the other things that we learned over the past few weeks. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, and we'll see you Thursday. We'll see you Thursday, February 4th in our Zoom session. And if you have any questions, you know to contact me. Hope all is well. Take care.